Hello, my friends of the psychedelic renaissance. It's Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, and this is the history of dose, set, and setting. Now, I'm sure the majority of you know what I mean when I say dose, set, and setting, but just in case there are some of you for which these terms are new, here's what they mean. Dose refers to the amount of the substance taken. Set refers to the mental makeup of the person taking the medicine. Now, this can include past traumas and experiences, or even just their hopes of what the medicine will do for them. And finally, setting refers to the environment in which you have your psychedelic journey. And while Timothy Leary is often credited with coining the phrase dose, set, and setting during the 1960s, all three of those ideas developed and evolved independently of the others earlier in the 20th century. Now, this is not to say that concepts like dose, set, and setting did not exist earlier in history. As early as the 2nd century, Plutarch records that one of the Delphic oracles inhaled too much of the psychedelic gases that caused her visions that she ran out of the temple, threw herself on the ground, and started freaking out. Well, everybody learned a lot about proper dose that day. Or we can simply look at some of the ancient temples where these psychedelic and entheogenic practices took place. I mean, the beautiful architecture of it would suggest to me that our ancient pagan ancestors knew all about proper setting for an entheogenic experience. And since these temples were providing an epiphany or a religious experience or a mystical experience, that alone provided the set. And of course, in those days, it was up to the priestess or the priest to measure out the dose. Now, moving up to the Renaissance era, we get our first clear description of dose from the alchemist Paracelsus, who famously said that the difference between a medicine and a poison could be found in the dose. A few decades after Paracelsus, we get our first unambiguous description of set in 1563. It's found in German physician Johann Wehr's treatise De Prestigis Daemonum et Incantationibus et Veneficis. Here, Wehr is describing what we today commonly call a witch's ointment or a flying ointment, and he's saying that because different people have different personalities, they have different responses and reactions to this ointment. Quote, and so they seem all the more to be carried off in their sleep to diverse regions where they have many varied experiences in accordance with the temperament of each individual and with the help of the ointment. Historically speaking, dose, set, and setting have existed in different places and different times throughout the human drama. I'd like to use the rest of this video to outline how Western intellectuals rediscovered the concepts of dose, set, and setting independently of each other years before Timothy Leary ever even heard the word psychedelic. Beginning with dose. I believe we can mark the rediscovery of dose by Western intellectuals to that fateful spring day, April 19th, 1943. On that day, Albert Hofmann took what he believed to be a minuscule amount of LSD. I believe it was like 250 millionths of a gram, which we now know is a massive amount of that medicine. Due to Hoffmann's mishap, later doctors would be very careful with the amount of LSD they administer to their volunteers, thus ushering in the rediscovery of dose among Western intellectuals. Now, since in those days all LSD sessions took place in drab medical environments, the idea of set and setting hadn't even occurred to anybody yet. Now, that would all change, at least for the concept of set, on the 5th of May, 1953. For on that day, Aldous Huxley would have the first of what would become many psychedelic experiences. Here, I'm referring to a conversation that took place between Maria Huxley, her husband Aldous, and Humphrey Osmond, the doctor who supplied the mescaline to Aldous, as recorded in what is arguably the most famous essay ever written in all of psychedelia, The Doors of Perception. At one point, Humphrey asks Aldous what his mindset is like during the mescaline experience, and now I'm reading from The Doors of Perception. Aldous responds, if you started in the wrong way, everything that happened would be a proof of the conspiracy against you. It would all be self-validating. You couldn't draw a breath without knowing it was part of the plot. If one began with fear and hate as the major premise, one would have to go on to that conclusion. So now Maria quickly pipes up and says, would you be able to fix your attention on what the Tibetan Book of the Dead calls the clear light? Maria was so wise. Even though she didn't use the term set, she knew that by changing Aldous' perspective of the experience from one of fear and hate to one of beauty, like focusing on the clear light that's mentioned in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that she could change the trajectory of Aldous' experience. So thank you, Maria Huxley, for ushering in the rediscovery of Set among Western intellectuals. And now it's only in 1955, 2 years after Aldous' legendary mescaline experience and almost 6,000 miles away, that we begin to see the development of what we call setting at Powick Hospital in merry old England. That year, doctors Ronald Sanderson, Margaret Kuttner, and Arthur Spencer received approval from the Regional Hospital Board to set up the world's first LSD wing at Powick Hospital. Now keep in mind, the LSD wing had very humble beginnings, starting as only 8 rooms, 5 for patients, each with a couch, a chalkboard, and a chair, 2 rooms for nurses, and a post-LSD session meetup area. But all of that was about to change, and here I'm reading from my forthcoming book, Wonder Child, LSD Before the Psychedelic 60s. Within 3 years, the LSD block at Powick was revamped into an environment in which traumatic childhood experiences could be relived in the emotional security of a family-like group. The doctors also added rooms that included toys, a sandbox, piano, a record player, and even a small petting zoo. And the patients were not confined to the inside walls of the wing. Merrily under the spell of LSD, they might walk among the grounds, pick flowers, and even swim naked in a nearby brook. And thus, at Powick Hospital during the mid-1950s, we get to watch Western intellectuals rediscover setting. And there you have it, the rediscovery of dose, set, and setting at different places and different times by Western intellectuals during the mid-20th century, years before Timothy Leary ever even heard of things like psilocybin and LSD. Well, my friends, that's all I have for you this time, and like always, I'd love to thank you for stopping by. Please like and share this video, subscribe to my YouTube page, and let's spread the truth about psychedelic history. And if you'd like to see me address something in psychedelic history, just send me a message. And until that day, I'm Tom Hutchinson, your psychedelic historian, reminding you that you free your mind by using your brain. Peace.